The council chamber fell silent as the holographic display flickered to life. 47 species represented thousands of years of collective wisdom, and yet every single delegate stared at the red sphere, dominating the star map with the same expression. Fear. Commander Hyun-woo watched from his position near the back wall. His scales shifted from green to pale yellow, a telltale sign of unease among his people, the Valkyrie. He had seen combat across a dozen systems, faced pirates and rebels without flinching. But that crimson boundary on the map made his blood run cold. "The motion is simple," announced Counselor Thrace. "A being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell. We reduce the quarantine zone around human space by 30 light-years. This would open up 3 valuable mining systems and 2 habitable worlds for colonization." The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted over each other, some in languages that required immediate translation. Hyun-woo noticed that none of them were shouting in agreement. Ambassador Dae-young rose slowly from his seat. The elderly Valkyrie commanded respect through presence alone. His scales were gray with age, but his eyes held the sharpness of someone who had seen things others only had nightmares about. The chamber quieted. "I was there," Dae-young said softly, his voice carrying through the silence. 400 years ago, when we made first contact with humanity. I was young then, eager, foolish. I thought we were welcoming another civilization into our great union." He paused, his clawed hand trembling slightly. "I was wrong?" Across the galaxy in a small apartment on the Valkyrie homeworld, Dr. Murray shut off her communication device and stared at her reflection. She looked human because she was human, though few people here knew that. Her false identity listed her as a hybrid from the outer colonies. Rare enough to be exotic but common enough not to draw too much attention, she had spent 3 years at the Valkyrie Institute of Xenanthropology, studying every species in the galaxy except the one she belonged to. The irony was not lost on her. Every database, every archive, every historical record about humans was sealed behind security. Protocols that would take a lifetime to crack, but Murray was patient. More importantly, she was desperate to understand why her own species lived in self-imposed exile back in the council chamber. Dae-young continued his story. The Krellian Empire was the strongest military power in the galaxy. 20 systems under their control, a fleet of 10,000 warships. They saw the humans expanding from their home system and decided to teach these newcomers a lesson about respecting established borders. Hyun-woo had heard this story before. Every military officer had, but hearing it from someone who witnessed it firsthand sent chills down his spine. The Krellians attacked a human colony world called New Haven, population of 2 million, mostly farmers and scientists. The attack killed 800,000 civilians in the first hour. Dae-young's voice grew hollow. "We expected the humans to surrender or negotiate. Every species does when faced with such overwhelming force." The holographic display changed, showing archival footage from 4 centuries ago. Warships bearing human insignia, sleek and dark, moved through space like hunting predators. The humans did not surrender. They did not negotiate. 73 days after the attack on New Haven, the Krellian Empire ceased to exist. The chamber filled with uneasy murmurs. Everyone knew what happened, but the details were classified at the highest levels. "Not defeated," Dae-young clarified, his voice shaking. "Erased. Every military installation, every shipyard, every weapons facility was destroyed with surgical precision. The humans disabled the Krellian fleet without killing a single soldier. Then they sent a message to the Krellian homeworld." He paused, and Hyun-woo found himself leaning forward despite knowing he should not want to hear what came next. The message was simple. It contained the complete genetic sequence of the Krellian species, mapped down to the last molecule. It showed detailed schematics for biological weapons specifically designed to target Krellian DNA, weapons that could be deployed from orbit and would eliminate every living Krellian in a matter of days. The message ended with 3 words: "We choose mercy." The silence in the chamber was absolute. The Krellians surrendered immediately. Not because they were defeated militarily, but because they understood they were dealing. with a species that could commit genocide with the press of a button and chose not to. That choice, counselors, is what terrifies us. Not human cruelty, but human restraint. Mireille finally cracked the first security layer on the historical archives late that night. What she found made her hands shake as she read through the reports. The Krellian War was worse than anyone had told her. Humanity had not just defeated an empire. They had demonstrated capabilities that defied everything the galaxy understood about warfare, the reports detailed. Weapon systems that could crack planets like eggs, nanite swarms that could disassemble ships at the molecular level, and artificial intelligence so advanced it could predict enemy movements hours before they were made. And humanity had developed all of this in a matter of weeks after. New Haven burned, but what caught her attention was a single line buried in a military analysis report. Human aggression appears directly proportional to threats against their civilians. Recommend avoiding population centers at all costs? She kept reading. The next document was a transcript from the human government's response after the war ended. We have seen what we are capable of when pushed to the edge. We have looked into the abyss of our own potential and found it bottomless. Therefore, by unanimous decision of Earth's Unified Council and confirmed by global referendum, humanity hereby imposes upon itself a quarantine zone of 200 light-years radius from Sol. We will venture no further. We will expand no more. We ask that the Galactic Union respect this boundary not for your safety, but for ours. We must learn to control what we have become before we can trust ourselves among the stars again. Mireille sat back, tears streaming down her face. The galaxy had not imprisoned humanity. Humanity had imprisoned itself. The vote on the council floor was predictable. 47 species, unanimous decision. The quarantine zone would not be reduced. If anything, several delegates suggested expanding it. As Hyun Woo left the chamber, he found Dai Yong waiting for him in the corridor. You have questions, the old ambassador said. It was not a question. I don't understand, Hyun Woo admitted. If humans are so dangerous, why not destroy them before they become a threat? Dae Young's scales shifted to a deep blue, the color of profound sadness among their kind. Because we cannot. Every war simulation we have run for 400 years ends the same way. If we attack humanity, we lose. If we somehow manage to destroy Earth, the colony worlds retaliate and we still lose. The only winning scenario is to leave them alone and pray they continue choosing mercy. He placed a clawed hand on Hyun Woo's shoulder. Sleep well, Commander. And be grateful that the most dangerous species in the galaxy wants nothing more than to be left in peace. Across the galaxy, Mireille downloaded every file she could access and encrypted them on a personal drive. She did not know what she would do with this information. But she knew one thing with certainty: the galaxy feared humanity not because of what they had done, but because of what they chose not to do every single day. That choice, that restraint, was the most terrifying weapon of all. The alarm blared through Boundary Station Alpha at 0347 hours, jolting Taesung from his sleep. He rolled out of bed and stumbled to his monitoring station, still wearing his sleeping clothes. The screen showed something that should have been impossible, a distress signal, originating from inside human space, but the signal was not in any human language. Taesung's fingers flew across the keyboard, running analysis after analysis. The signal was Theshun, a species known for their peaceful exploration of space. According to the coordinates, their ship was approximately 40 light-years past the boundary, drifting near the agricultural world of New Sol. This is going to cause problems, Taesung muttered. Reaching for his communication link to Earth Command, 3 systems away. Commander Hyun Woo was in the middle of his morning meditation when his personal communicator buzzed with an emergency priority signal. The message was brief and terrifying. Theshun civilian vessel lost inside human space. Rescue mission authorized. You have command. Every military instinct screamed at him to refuse. Nobody entered human space, nobody. The last probe sent across the boundary, 200 years ago, had been returned with a polite note attached. Please respect the quarantine. We do not wish to be disturbed. But a civilian ship with 200 souls on board changed the equation. Dr. Mireille was packing her research materials when Hyunwoo's office called. They needed a cultural liaison, someone who understood humans. Her false identity listed her as having studied human culture extensively. She volunteered before they could finish explaining the mission. Within 6 hours, a rescue fleet of 5 ships assembled at the boundary. Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the red line on his navigation display grow closer. Ambassador Dae-young had come aboard personally, despite his advanced age. "If we are about to start a war," the old Valkyrie had said, "I want to be present for the first shot." The moment they crossed the boundary, every alarm on every ship began screaming. Hyunwoo expected weapons fire, boarding parties, some kind of aggressive response. Instead, nothing happened. They traveled for 3 days toward the Veshan ship's last known position. During that time, they passed 2 human worlds. Long-range scans showed cities, farmland, orbital stations, and civilian traffic. It looked ordinary, peaceful, nothing like the militarized fortress they expected. "It's wrong," Mireille whispered, staring at the scans. "This is all wrong." Hyunwoo turned to her. "What do you mean?" "Look at those cities. No defensive batteries. No shield generators. No military installations." She pointed at the display. "These worlds are completely undefended." "Maybe the defenses are hidden," suggested the tactical officer. Mireille shook her head. "Or maybe they don't need defenses because nothing in the galaxy is stupid enough to attack them." On New Sol, Captain Haniel reviewed the reports coming from her tracking stations. 5 alien vessels had entered human space 3 days ago and were approaching the lost Veshan ship. Their weapons were powered down, their shields minimal. They were not acting hostile. Still, she ordered her vessel, the Steadfast Resolve, to shadow them at a distance. 400 years of peace did not mean humanity had forgotten how to watch potential threats. The Veshan ship was exactly where the distress signal indicated. In stable orbit around New Sol, Hyunwoo's fleet approached cautiously. Scanning for damage or signs of attack, the ship was intact. Life signs normal. No signs of weapons fire or hostile action. "They just drifted off course," the sensor officer reported. "Their navigation system malfunctioned during a warp jump. They've been stuck here for 5 days." Hyunwoo authorized a docking procedure. When they boarded the Veshan vessel, they found the crew terrified but unharmed. The captain, a female Veshan named Kira, practically sobbed with relief. "We thought we were dead," she said, her tentacles trembling. "We thought the humans would kill us for trespassing." "Did they make contact?" Hyunwoo asked. "No, we've been monitoring their communications. They know we're here. We can hear them talking about us on planetary channels. But nobody has approached or threatened us." Mireille found that detail fascinating. "They're just leaving you alone?" "One ship came close on the 2nd day," Kira explained. "It scanned us, then left. We received a text message an hour later asking if we needed medical assistance. We were too afraid to respond." Hyunwoo's scales shifted to orange, indicating confusion. This was not how anyone expected humans to behave, while his engineering team worked on repairing the Veshan ship's navigation system. Hyunwoo authorized limited scanning of New Sol. The planet below had a population of 50 million humans. They lived in cities that blended technology with nature, grew food in vast agricultural zones, and seemed to spend most of their time on art, education, and scientific research. "It's like they're not even military anymore," the tactical officer said. Sounding disturbed by the concept, Dae-young studied the scans with an unreadable expression. "Oh, they're still military. They're just choosing not to show it." On the 4th day, Captain Haniel made her decision. The alien rescue fleet had behaved respectfully, had not threatened any human assets, and appeared genuinely interested in helping the Veshan crew. It was time to make official contact. The communication came through on standard Galactic Union frequencies. Hyunwoo nearly fell out of his chair when his communication officer played the message. "Alien vessels, this is Captain Haniel of the human defense ship Steadfast Resolve. We have been monitoring your rescue operation. Your presence in human space is noted and understood as unintentional. We offer assistance in repairing your damaged vessel and safe passage back to the boundary. Hyun-woo looked at Dae-young, who simply nodded. Accept her offer, the old ambassador said, and request permission to meet face to face. 3 hours later, a human shuttle docked with Hyun-woo's flagship. Captain Haniel came aboard with 2 others, a historian named Sung-ho and a government official called Young-suk. Mireille watched them enter the conference room and felt her heart race. These were her people. The first humans she had seen in person since leaving the colony worlds as a child. Haniel was professional, calm and surprisingly friendly. She explained that humanity had tracked the rescue fleet from the moment it crossed the boundary but chose not to interfere with a legitimate rescue operation. We appreciate your restraint in not approaching our worlds, Haniel said, and we respect your mission to save lives. These are values we share. Hyun-woo found himself relaxing despite every instinct telling him to stay alert. We were told that entering human space meant certain death. Haniel smiled sadly. We told you that 400 years ago because we needed you to fear us enough to leave us alone. We needed time to understand ourselves, to learn control. And have you? Dae-young asked quietly. Learn control? We try. Every single day we try. Young-suk produced a datapad. We would like to extend an invitation. A small delegation from your fleet is welcome to visit Earth. It is time, we believe, for the galaxy to see what humanity has become. Hyun-woo's scales went white with shock. Nobody had set foot on Earth in 400 years. Mireille spoke up before she could stop herself. I'll go. Everyone turned to look at her. She felt her false identity crumbling under Haniel's steady gaze. You're human, Haniel said softly. It was not a question. Mireille nodded, tears streaming down her face. Haniel crossed the room and embraced her. Welcome home, sister. It's time you learned the truth about what we are and what we choose to be. The repairs to the Deshan ship were completed with human assistance. As the rescue fleet prepared to depart, Hyun-woo, Mireille, and Dae-young transferred. To the steadfast resolve, they were going to Earth. They were going to learn the truth that the galaxy had feared for 4 centuries, and nothing would ever be the same again. Earth hung in the view screen like a blue jewel, and the ray could not stop the tears from falling. She had been born on a colony world, had never seen humanity's birthplace, had spent her entire adult life pretending to be something she was not. Now, finally, she was going home. Commander Hyun-woo stood beside her, his scales shifting through colors he could not control. Fear, wonder, curiosity, all mixing together. Ambassador Dae-young simply stared at the planet in silence, remembering a time 400 years ago when he had last approached this world with very different expectations. The steadfast resolve descended through the atmosphere, and Captain Haniel pointed out landmarks as they passed over continents. Cities gleamed in the sunlight, but they were different from the megacities that dominated other advanced worlds. These blended with forests and rivers as if humanity had learned to live alongside nature rather than conquering it. We rebuilt after the Krellian War, Haniel explained. But we rebuilt differently. We decided that if we were going to imprison ourselves, we might as well make the prison beautiful. They landed at a facility outside what had once been called Geneva. A small group waited to greet them, led by a woman introduced as Ambassador Kyung-mi, humanity's first official diplomat in 2 centuries. Welcome to Earth, Kyung-mi said, bowing in the traditional human gesture of respect. We know you have questions. We promise to answer them honestly. The tour began at the Museum of Restraint, a massive structure built into the side of a mountain. Inside, Sung-ho the historian served as their guide. The first exhibit showed images from the Krellian War, and Hyun-woo had to look away from some of them. 800,000 dead on New Haven, Sung-ho said quietly. We remember every single one. Their names are inscribed on a memorial that stretches for 3 kilometers. We visit it every year to remind ourselves of what happens when restraint fails. But the next exhibits were what made Hyunwoo's blood run cold. Weapons systems. Hundreds of them. Each more terrifying than the last. The genetic targeting system you've heard about, Seung-ho said, gesturing to one display. Capable of creating species-specific biological weapons in 72 hours. We developed it in 48 hours after New Haven fell. Another display showed schematics for something called a quantum disruption device that could supposedly unravel the molecular bonds of any matter within 1,000-kilometer radius. We tested it once, Seung-ho said, on an uninhabited moon. The moon no longer exists. Display after display showed weapons that defied understanding. Nanite swarms that could consume entire fleets. Artificial intelligences that could hack any computer system in seconds. Gravitational weapons that could create localized black holes. Energy weapons that could sterilize a planet's surface in minutes. We built all of these in 73 days, Seung-ho said, and we have never used them in combat. After the Krellians surrendered, we held a referendum. Should we continue expanding? Should we take our place as a military power in the galaxy? He led them to a massive screen showing the vote tallies from 400 years ago. 89% voted to impose the quarantine on ourselves. We saw what we became when pushed to the edge, and we were terrified of our own potential. Mireille finally found her voice. But you didn't stop advancing technology. Young Suk, who had joined them, nodded. No, we didn't. That would be like trying to forget how to think. Instead, we redirected our efforts. The next building they visited was called the Institute of Applied Peace. Inside, scientists worked on projects that made Hyunwoo realize just how far behind the rest of the galaxy had fallen. Medical technology that can cure any disease by rewriting DNA, Young Suk explained, showing them a laboratory. Energy systems that could provide unlimited power to entire star systems. Agricultural techniques that could end hunger on any world. Transportation technology that makes current warp drives look like ancient sailing ships. Why haven't you shared this? Hyunwoo asked, his voice hoarse. Because every single one of these technologies can be weaponized, Young Suk said sadly. Our medical nanites could cure cancer, or they could be programmed to cause it. Our energy systems could power cities or destroy them. We learned during the war that there is no such thing as purely peaceful technology in the hands of a species capable of war. They ate dinner in a restaurant overlooking the ocean. Real food grown in soil, prepared by human hands. Dae-young barely touched his meal, lost in thought. I don't understand, he finally said. You have the power to dominate the galaxy, to become the greatest empire in history. Why choose isolation? Ambassador Kyunmi leaned forward. Let me tell you about the night of the referendum, 400 years ago. I've studied the historical records extensively. Do you know what the most common reason was for voting in favor of quarantine? They waited. Guilt. Humanity felt guilty for what we did to the Krellians. Not because we defeated them, but because of how easily we did it. How efficiently. How thoroughly. We looked at ourselves and saw monsters who had simply chosen not to kill everyone. She paused, collecting her thoughts. There's a quote from one of the referendum speeches that stayed with me. We have become death, destroyer of worlds, and we have chosen to lock ourselves away before we destroy more. This is not weakness. This is the only moral choice left to us. Mireille spoke up, her voice thick with emotion. So humanity has been in exile for 400 years as punishment for defending itself? Not punishment, Kyungmi corrected gently. Protection. We're protecting the galaxy from what we might become if we forgot to be afraid of ourselves. The next day, they visited the Hall of Choices. This building contained no weapons or technology. Instead, it held art, paintings, sculptures, music, literature, all created in the 400 years since the quarantine began. We turned inward, Seung-ho explained. We focused on understanding ourselves, on exploring consciousness and creativity, on answering the question of what it means to be human. We've had 4 centuries of peace to think about who we want to be. One painting caught Hyunwoo's attention. It showed a human hand holding a knife, but the blade was pointed toward the person's own heart rather than outward. It's called the Guardian's Burden, Sung-ho said. The artist wanted to express that the greatest act of protection is sometimes protecting others from yourself. On their final evening on Earth, they gathered in a small garden. Lanterns floated on a pond, and the sound of water created a peaceful atmosphere that seemed impossible given everything they had learned. Dae-young broke the silence. I need to tell you something I've never told anyone outside the Vokari leadership. After the Krellian War, we ran combat simulations. Thousands of them. Every possible scenario of the galaxy versus humanity. He looked at each of them in turn. We lost every single time. Even when we outnumbered you 1,000,000 to 1, even when we used weapons we've never actually built, even when we assumed you wouldn't advance technologically for centuries. We always lost. Hanyul nodded slowly. We know. We ran the same simulations. And that's why you chose quarantine, Hyun-woo said, finally understanding. Not because you were afraid of us attacking you. Exactly, Kyung-mi confirmed. We knew that if war came, we would win. And winning would mean genocide on a scale the galaxy has never seen. We would become the very monsters we fought against. So we removed ourselves from the equation. Marae felt something break inside her. You've been alone for 400 years to protect people who fear and hate you. They don't hate us, Young-suk said gently. They're afraid of us. There's a difference. And they have every right to be afraid. We're afraid of ourselves. As they prepared to leave Earth the next morning, Ambassador Kyung-mi presented them with a gift. A small data crystal. This contains everything we've learned in 400 years. Medical advances, energy systems, agricultural techniques, all of it. With one condition, it can only be used for peaceful purposes. We know we can't enforce that, but we're trusting you to make the right choice. Han-woo held the crystal carefully, understanding the weight of what he held. Why give this to us? Why now? Because isolation doesn't work if there's no one left to isolate from? Kyung-mi said. We've been monitoring the galaxy. We know about the problems you face. Resource shortages, diseases, conflicts. We can help. We should help. The question is whether the galaxy is ready to let us. As the steadfast resolve left Earth's atmosphere, Marae looked back at her homeworld. She finally understood why humanity had chosen exile. The most dangerous beings in the galaxy were not those who loved violence, but those who understood it completely and chose peace anyway, and that choice, renewed every single day for 400 years, was the most powerful weapon humanity possessed. The distress signal came from the outer rim at 14:23 hours, and within minutes every military command center in the galaxy went into emergency mode. Commander Hyun-woo was still aboard the Steadfast Resolve, 3 days from the human boundary when the message reached him. Unknown hostile forces. Repeat, unknown hostile forces. They're not attacking our ships. They're consuming them. The transmission cut off in a burst of static and screaming. Captain Hanyul pulled up the long-range scans, and what they showed made no sense. Massive organic vessels, thousands of them, pouring through a rupture in space itself. They moved like a swarm of insects, surrounding Union ships and stations before dissolving them at the molecular level. "Get me Earth Command," Hanyul said, her voice tight with controlled tension. Now, Admiral Beora's face appeared on the screen within seconds. She was younger than Hyun-woo expected, perhaps 50 years old, with sharp eyes that had never seen real combat. 400 years of peace had produced a generation of human military leaders, who trained endlessly for a war they hoped would never come. "We're seeing it," Beora said before Hanyul could speak. "Velkoth Swarm, our deep space probes encountered them 300 years ago at the edge of the next galaxy. We've been tracking their movement ever since." Young-suk appeared beside Beora, her face pale. "They've destroyed 3 galaxies. Every living thing consumed. They don't negotiate, don't communicate, don't stop. They just eat and move on." The Galactic Union Council convened an emergency session. Hyun-woo watched the proceedings via quantum link, still aboard the human vessel. The chamber that had been full of confident delegates just weeks ago was now filled with panic. 12 worlds had gone dark in 48 hours. The swarm's advance was systematic, efficient, unstoppable. Every Union fleet sent to engage them was consumed. Every weapon used against them failed. They adapted to each strategy in minutes, learning and evolving faster than any artificial intelligence. "We need evacuation procedures," one delegate shouted. "We need to fall back to the core systems, and then what?" Another screamed. "They'll just consume those too. We have nowhere to run?" Ambassador De-Jong stood slowly. The chamber fell silent, remembering who he was, what he had seen. "There is one option," the old Valkyrie said quietly. "We ask the humans for help." The silence stretched for a long moment before chaos erupted. Half the delegates shouted in favor, half against. Some called it suicide to invite humans into Union space. Others argued they were already facing extinction and had nothing to lose. The vote was called. By a margin of 31 to 16, the Council authorized a formal request for human military intervention on Earth. The entire Unified Council gathered for the first time in 50 years. Sun-Ho watched from the observation gallery as humanity debated its future. The chamber was split almost evenly. Half argued that the quarantine was absolute, that humanity had made a promise to stay isolated regardless of external circumstances. The other half argued that isolation was meaningless if there was no galaxy left to isolate from. "We swore an oath 400 years ago," one counselor argued. "We swore to never again unleash our full military capability. If we break that oath, what are we?" "Dead," another counselor shot back. "We'll be dead, along with every other species in this galaxy? Is that what our oath means? That we stand by and watch genocide happen because we're afraid of ourselves?" Dr. Myray, given special permission to address the council as a cultural liaison, stood at the podium. Her hands shook as she gripped the edges. "I spent my whole life studying alien species," she began. "I learned their languages, their cultures, their histories. And you know what I learned? They're not that different from us. They love their children. They create art. They dream about the future. They're worth saving." She paused, gathering her courage. "But I also learned something else during my time on Earth. Humanity made a choice 400 years ago to be better than our worst impulses. That choice, that restraint, is what makes us good. But goodness without action is just cowardice. If we can stop this, and we don't, we're not being moral. We're being complicit." The vote was close. 51% in favor of intervention. 49% against. But the decision was made. Admiral Biora activated defense systems that had been dormant for 4 centuries. In orbit around Earth, massive shipyards that had been building scientific vessels suddenly shifted production. Weapons platforms that had been kept in perfect maintenance but never armed suddenly came online. Ensign J1 was 23 years old and had never expected to see actual combat. He had joined the defense force because it was a family tradition, assuming he would spend his career running drills and maintaining equipment. Now he stood on the bridge of the destroyer Swift Justice as it joined 200 other human vessels, forming a battle line at the edge of human space. The swarm had crossed into the quarantine zone. They were heading directly toward New Sol, the agricultural world where the Deshan ship had drifted weeks earlier. Population 50 million. No defenses except for the one human vessel that had remained in orbit. The Steadfast Resolve. Captain Haniel had refused evacuation orders. "If they want this world," she told Admiral Biora, "they'll have to go through me first." She did not have to wait long. The swarm emerged from warp space like a living nightmare. Organic vessels the size of moons, surrounded by millions of smaller attack craft. They moved with disturbing coordination. Every unit acting as part of a single vast intelligence. Haniel opened a channel to the fleet forming behind her. "All units, this is Steadfast Resolve. We have visual on hostile forces. There are approximately 30,000 vessels of various sizes. Estimate total biomass equivalent to a small planet." Admiral Biora's voice came through calm and clear. "Acknowledged, Captain." Hold position. Reinforcements arriving in 3 minutes. J1 watched his tactical display as the rest of the human fleet dropped out of warp around them. 200 ships against 30,000. The number should have been terrifying, but then he saw what those ships were carrying. Weapon systems that had been theoretical for 400 years were now armed and ready. The same technology that had made humanity decide to quarantine itself was about to be deployed in defense of a galaxy that feared them. All vessels, Gora's voice rang across every channel. You know what we're capable of. You know what we chose to lock away? Today we unlock it. Not for conquest. Not for revenge. But to protect those who cannot protect themselves. She paused, and J1 heard the weight of history in her next words. Weapons free. Show them why even the stars know to fear us? The swarm crossed into weapons range, their organic hulls rippling with anticipation. They had consumed 3 galaxies. They had never encountered resistance they could not overcome. They were about to learn why humanity had spent 400 years afraid of itself. Commander Hyun Woo, watching from the steadfast resolve, saw the first human shot fired. It was a beam of concentrated energy that seemed to split space itself. It struck the lead swarm vessel, and the creature simply ceased to exist, not exploded, not destroyed, but erased from existence at the quantum level. Then the real battle began. Human vessels moved through space like dancers in a deadly ballet. The swarm adapted to each weapon after the first use, exactly as expected. But humanity had spent 400 years developing weapons, and they had thousands of different systems to deploy. When the swarm adapted to energy weapons, humanity switched to kinetic projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. When they adapted to that, nanite swarms were deployed that rewrote the swarm's organic coding at the molecular level. When they adapted to nanites, gravitational weapons created localized distortions that crushed swarm vessels into singularities. They're learning, J1 reported, watching his tactical display. They're adapting to everything we throw at them. Good, his captain replied calmly. We're counting on it. Because that was the secret. Humanity was not trying to win with any single weapon. They were overwhelming the swarm's ability to adapt by using every weapon simultaneously. The swarm intelligence could process and counter any single threat, but it could not adapt to thousands of different attack vectors all at once. It was not a battle. It was a demonstration. A reminder of why humanity had chosen exile rather than risk showing the galaxy what they could do. The swarm tried to retreat after the first hour, but humanity had anticipated that too. The space around the battlefield was enclosed in a quantum barrier that prevented warp travel. Nothing was leaving until one side was completely destroyed. Young-SOO-K stood in Earth Command, watching the battle unfold across a dozen screens. Beside her, Sungho was recording everything for the historical archives. We're winning, he said, his voice hollow. I know, Young Suk replied. That's what scares me. Because winning meant showing the galaxy exactly what humanity had been hiding for 400 years. And once you show that kind of power, you can never take it back. The battle lasted 4 hours and 17 minutes. In that time, every sensor in the galaxy capable of detecting the engagement recorded what happened. 47 species watched in real time as humanity fought a war the way a surgeon performs an operation. Precise, efficient, devastating, the Velkoth swarm had consumed 3 galaxies. They had evolved over millions of years to be the perfect predator, adapting to any threat, learning from any encounter. They had never faced extinction because they had never faced anything stronger than themselves. Until now, Ensign J1 watched his tactical display as the last swarm vessel was systematically dismantled. The human fleet had not destroyed them with brute force. Instead, they had rewritten the swarm's genetic code, turning their own adaptive biology against them. The creatures that had consumed entire galaxies were now consuming themselves at the molecular level. Final hostile eliminated, Captain Haniel reported from the steadfast resolve. Her voice was steady, professional, betraying none of the horror she felt at what she had just witnessed her own species do. Admiral Bora's face appeared on every screen across the human fleet. She looked older than she had 4 hours ago, as if the weight of what they had done had aged her in real time. All vessels, stand down. Begin recovery operations for any survivors from damaged Union ships in the area. She paused. And someone open a channel to every species in the galaxy. They deserve an explanation. In the Galactic Union Council chambers, delegates sat in stunned silence. They had watched the battle. They had seen weapons that defied physics, tactics that seemed to predict the future, a level of military coordination that suggested the human fleet operated as a single vast intelligence, not a single human vessel had been destroyed. The swarm that had wiped out 12 Union worlds in 2 days had been annihilated without humanity suffering a single casualty. Commander Han Wu stood at the observation window of the Steadfast Resolve, staring at the debris field where 30,000 swarm vessels had been just hours ago. His scales had gone completely white, a color his species only displayed in the presence of something beyond comprehension. Now you understand, Ambassador De Jong said quietly, appearing beside him. This is what we feared. This is what they've been hiding for 400 years. Dr. Murray joined them, tears streaming down her face. We tried to tell you. We tried to show you that humanity chose restraint. But nobody truly understands restraint until they see what's being restrained. The broadcast began at 1847 hours. Sung Ho stood before cameras that transmitted to every inhabited world in the galaxy. His face was somber, his voice heavy with the weight of history. 4 hours ago, humanity engaged in combat for the first time in 400 years. What you witnessed was not the full extent of our capabilities. The weapon systems we deployed represent approximately 20% of our available arsenal. We showed you enough to eliminate the swarm threat. We did not show you everything because we do not want you to understand everything. He paused, letting that sink in. 400 years ago, we made a choice. We saw what we were capable of when pushed to the edge, and we decided to push ourselves no further. We imposed quarantine not because you forced us to, but because we forced ourselves. Today, we broke that quarantine not to demonstrate power, but to preserve life. The camera switched to Admiral Biora, standing on the bridge of her flagship, surrounded by displays showing the human fleet beginning decommissioning procedures. Effective immediately, 80% of the weapon systems used today are being destroyed. Not deactivated. Not stored. Destroyed. We are keeping only what we need to defend ourselves and to respond to threats like the swarm. Everything else is being dismantled because we do not trust ourselves with it. She looked directly into the camera, and every being watching felt the weight of her gaze. We did not want this. We did not want to show you what we can do. But we could not stand by and watch genocide happen when we had the power to stop it. This does not make us heroes. It makes us dangerous beings who occasionally make the right choice. In Earth Command, Young Suk watched the decommissioning begin. Massive weapons platforms that had taken days to activate were being torn apart. Nanet production facilities were being shut down permanently. The quantum disruptors that had erased swarm vessels from existence were being reduced to their component atoms. We're destroying in hours what took centuries to build, she said to Sung Ho, who stood beside her. Good, he replied. Let them see that we're afraid of our own weapons. Let them understand that our greatest strength is knowing when to be weak. Ambassador Kyung Mi addressed the Galactic Union Council via quantum link. The chamber was still silent, delegates trying to process what they had witnessed. We propose a new arrangement, Kyung Mi said. The quarantine remains in place, but with exceptions. Cultural exchange programs, scientific collaboration, joint research into peaceful technologies, and mutual defense agreements for threats like the swarm. She gestured to Hyan Wu and De Jong, who stood with her. These individuals have seen our worlds, have spoken with our people, have learned our history. We propose they serve as permanent liaisons between humanity and the Union. They will have unrestricted access to human space, and will serve as bridges between our peoples. The vote was not even close. Unanimous approval. Dr. Murray was appointed as humanity's ambassador at large, the first human to hold an official position in the Galactic Union. Her first act was to establish exchange programs allowing alien students to study on Earth and human students to study on Union worlds. We've been strangers for 400 years, she said in her inaugural address. It's time we became neighbors instead. 3 months after the battle, J1 stood at an observation deck on Boundary Station Alpha, watching reconstruction efforts on a Union world that had been partially damaged by the swarm. Human construction crews worked alongside alien workers, teaching them techniques that could rebuild a city in weeks rather than years. Young Suk found him there, staring out at the stars. Having doubts? She asked. I don't understand, J1 admitted. We proved we're stronger than anyone in the galaxy. We could rule them all. Why are we destroying our weapons and going back into quarantine? Young Suk smiled sadly. Let me tell you something my grandmother told me. She lived through the referendum 400 years ago, voted to impose the quarantine. I asked her once if she regretted that choice, if she wished humanity had taken its place as a galactic power. She pointed at Earth, visible in the distance as a blue marble among the stars. She said that power without restraint is just another word for tyranny. She said that the strongest person in any room is not the one who can hurt everyone else, but the one who could and chooses not to. She said that humanity's greatest achievement would never be our technology or our weapons, but our ability to wake up every single day and choose to be better than our worst impulses. J1 thought about that. So we're going back into quarantine because we're afraid of what we might become. No, Young Suk corrected gently. We're maintaining the quarantine because we know exactly what we could become. We've seen it. We've touched it. 4 hours and 17 minutes was enough to remind us why we made that choice 400 years ago. She turned to face him fully. The swarm was defeated not because we were cruel, but because we understood cruelty so completely that we could counter it perfectly. That's what makes us dangerous. Not that we have weapons, but that we understand violence at a fundamental level. And the only moral response to that understanding is to choose peace from a position of overwhelming power. Across the galaxy, star charts were being updated. The red sphere marking human space remained, but it now bore a new designation. Not quarantine zone or restricted space, but something that every species could agree on. Protected space by their choice and ours. It was a reminder, not of what humanity had done, but of what they chose not to do every single day. Commander Hyun-woo returned to the Council as humanity's primary liaison. His first report summarized everything he had learned, everything he had witnessed. It ended with a single paragraph that would be quoted for generations to come. Humanity is the most dangerous species in the galaxy not because they excel at violence, but because they understand it completely and still choose peace. They have built weapons that could end all life, and they lock them away. They have the power to dominate, and they choose isolation. They have demonstrated capabilities that defy comprehension, and they immediately destroy most of those capabilities to prevent themselves from being tempted to use them again. We do not fear humanity because they are evil. We fear them because they are good, despite having every reason and every ability not to be. In a small garden on Earth, Ambassador Dae-Jung sat with Moirae, drinking tea and watching the sunset. The old Valkyrie had retired from active service, but had chosen to spend his remaining years on Earth, studying humanity up close. Do you think it will last? Moirae asked. 400 years of peace almost ended. What if another threat comes? Dae-Jung considered the question carefully. I think humanity will do what it always does. It will debate, argue, struggle with the moral implications, and then eventually make the hard choice. Not the easy choice, not the popular choice, but the choice that allows them to sleep at night. He looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Every species has its nature. Some are warriors. Some are scholars. Some are traders. But humanity's nature is perhaps the strangest of all. You are beings of infinite potential for both creation and destruction. And you have chosen to master yourselves before attempting to master anything else, Myray smiled. Even the stars know why we stay behind our boundary. Yes, Dae-Young agreed. And perhaps that is the greatest compliment any species could receive. To be so powerful that even the universe itself respects your choice to limit that power. The quarantine remained. Humanity stayed within its self-imposed boundaries, venturing out only for scientific exchange, cultural missions, and mutual defense. They did not build an empire. They did not seek conquest. They simply existed as a reminder that the strongest beings are sometimes the ones who choose to be gentle. And every species in the galaxy slept a little easier knowing that the most dangerous beings in existence were more afraid of themselves than anyone else could ever be.